Industrial policy is often framed as one of the tools that countries can use to create jobs at scale. However, how does inclusive and sustainable agro-industrial development come about, and how do different types of institutions shape this endeavor? My research investigates these questions by looking at two sugar industries, that is Kenya and Uganda. Coincidentally, the main sugar-producing zones in these two countries are located in the same agroecological zone and therefore lend themselves quite well to a comparative study. What I do is explore the trajectories that these two industries have taken on. And what this study finds is that while they started off at fairly similar conditions, they have since taken on completely different trajectories. One has grown to become a net exporter, serving a good chunk of the East African sugar demand, while the other has become a net importer, with 5 of its largest companies collapsing in the last 15 years. So why is this the case, and what is it about these two institutional landscapes that has created these two trajectories? One of the answers lies in the relationship that evolved between the government and the largest manufacturers. In Uganda, there was much faster and much earlier privatization, and the regime also went on to develop closer links between the government and the largest manufacturers. Therefore, they were able to grow much faster. At the same time, in Kenya, there was far more resistance to privatization, and the government maintained a tight grip on both production and also price controls. What evolved over time was this perverse interplay between protectionism and clientelism that eventually drove 5 companies into the ground. Now, based on these two trajectories, one would where on one hand we have a growing manufacturing base that is becoming a net exporter in the East African region, that is Uganda, and Kenya that is declining. One would expect that farmers' trajectories would also follow the same path. However, what we find is that they end up worse off in both cases. So why is this the case? The answer lies, at least as far as we could tell, in the second major institutional change that happened at around this time, and that is the dismantling of the farmer registration system. Now, this was the main planning and coordination tool that existed between manufacturers and producers. In its absence, yes, farmers had far more freedom in the market, and for a while they even got better prices. However, over time, they also were exposed to much more price volatility and also had far less access to extension support. And eventually, the last remaining bits of the farmer extension system also collapsed. Now, what does all this mean for the creation of decent jobs where they are needed most? Creation of decent jobs at scale enough to make a difference in the rural economy. What we find is that whether a country decides to take a more passive stance, as in Uganda's case, or a more active stance, as in Kenya's case, there are simply certain fundamental functions that have to be fulfilled in the ecosystem for industrialization to be inclusive or sustainable, and that is vertical and horizontal coordination. Vertical coordination to balance the power imbalances that inherently exist between manufacturers and other value chain players vis-a-vis small-scale producers. Horizontal, to coordinate how farmers come together and actually create collective agency so that their preferences and realities at the ground are better reflected at national level policy making. Thank you.